listening to My Bookcase Slays, a podcast taking readers on a deeper dive into killer reads. I'm your host, Melissa Westmeyer. Today, I'm very excited to introduce to you E.C. Nevin and her book, A Novel Murder. Eve, welcome. This is
Hi.
your debut novel,
Yes.
and it's a
Yes, it's
murder
very
mystery
exciting.
at a murder mystery writers conference, at a murder mystery fan conference. Like, how meta is that?
Yeah, I used to go, well, I still go to a lot of these festivals. Every time I've been at them, I've been, after a few glasses of wine, I've said, like, someone should really set a book at one of these festivals. All these writers who obsess about ways to murder people all together in one place. Like, why has no one done that? So eventually I just did it myself.
And you did it so well. Like, the plotting of this book, I did not know till the very end who was responsible for the murder. And it was an exciting little thrill. Obviously, this is where the inspiration came from, is as you've attended these events. What scene in the book came to you first?
The very first one. So I didn't know if this book would work. I didn't know if the voice would feel right to me. I just thought, oh, I'll just kind of give it a go, no pressure. And I just sat down and just wrote the prologue and without really thinking too much about it. And it basically stayed the same, the
Oh,
prologue. So
love
that
it.
first scene just came to me really naturally.
Just for readers' reference, the first scene is our anchor character. She is rolling in as an author at a literary conference, and immediately she's told, "Oh, we don't have your tag. You've got to show up as a guest." She's feeling very diminished from the outset, very insecure about herself, right?
Mm.
And I think even if you're not a writer, you can appreciate her feeling of just being the odd man out in an experience.
Yeah. I mean, these festivals are they're really, really fun, but they can be really intimidating for people who don't know many people there. Even if you do know, if I still find them intimidating and I've been going for a long time. But also just in all walks of life, we've all had that feeling where you walk in somewhere going, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. I don't know anyone. And you just feel like such an outsider. I think everyone or most people can relate to that feeling.
I think so. I certainly did. I'm like, oh, she's in my head writing this character. Like, I felt exactly that, where you're just like sitting back, scoping out the room, trying to figure out where you're going to slide in. Who are you going to talk to? Who's going to talk to you?
And especially in the author community, I feel, because you're never a big enough author, right? I used to sort of think if you've got a book deal of any sort, or even if not even that, if you finished writing a book is a massive achievement, then amazing, you're an author, how exciting. And as soon as you're in it, you always just look at the people who are more successful, bigger names, have bigger queues for people trying to buy their books, and you always feel like the small outsider who's not quite qualified to be there. I don't know if that ever stops. We'll have to ask, I don't know, Stephen King. But
Or maybe we'll circle back to this after your next book, because this, I think, is going to be huge. And then I'll be like, oh, she's one of those writers with the long line and the big social media presence and all of that. What surprised you while you were writing this book?
oh, what surprised me? What about the writing process?
About how the direction the book took, anything.
Uh, all of it. I'm not a plotter, it turns out. I'm not
Oh,
very good at plotting things out and knowing exactly when things happen. I thought that was be the obvious way to write a book. And I try to make plans. I always try to make plans. I feel like if I can just make this plan, I can just then sit down and write it and it'll be super easy. But I found it very surprising that is not how it works for me. And everyone's different. Some writers can work like that, but for me, I was really surprised that once I created characters, they wouldn't fit the plot, which I had spent so long trying to work out. So, and I used to never really believe authors when they said things like that. People would say, I thought it was a bit annoying. People would say things like, oh, create the characters and then they just run away, they do what they want to do. And I'd be thinking, like, you
mhm.
made these characters up. It's your book. Come on. But
Yeah.
it's true. You invent these characters, and as soon as they're on the page and have a life of their own, they don't quite fit what you want them to do because they are people all of a sudden. And who they are, that action doesn't quite fit who they are. So, yeah, I found it surprising that I couldn't quite figure out what was going to happen myself. Um, and therefore, the plot was all surprising as well because it kind of happened to me.
Oh, I love that. Okay, yes, and I agree. It does sound so pretentious when people say that. Oh, the characters just took on a life of their own. But it is true. Like they totally do their thing. And you're sometimes you get to the end of the scene, you're like, well, I did not see that coming. Okay then, right?
And then you're like, oh no, now nothing else is going to make any sense. And then you've got to rethink everything. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
pain, but it's fun.
it's a pain in the butt sometimes. You're absolutely right. Okay, so which of these characters you have a she has a whole cast. Listeners, is a whole cast of crazy characters in this book, starting with the victim, and all the way through. We've got a couple of assistants. We've got a couple of big name authors. We've got one who's like a huge striver who's constantly videotaping everything on her phone to show up on TikTok and wherever else. Which of these characters do you think would be the most fun to hang out with in real life, Eve?
Um, I loved Kimberly, who is the sort of big shot American editor who's visiting the UK for this festival. And again, I didn't know I was going to love her so much, but I loved every time I was writing her. I loved being on the page. Whether I'd really like her in real life because she's a bit mean. I don't really like people who are a bit mean, but I like how she's glamorous and she portrays a sense of being really self-assured and
Mhm.
she's smart and she's can be quite cutting and witty. So I she's probably my favorite character. I'd quite like to hang out with Brad, who is the big brand author, because he just seems like a bit of a laugh.
He does indeed. Which of these characters would be awful to know in person? And the landlady at the Airbnb does not count.
I forgot about her for a moment because I'm now writing the other book, so I need to reread this one. Who'd be awful to hang out with? Abby, the assistant, who a lot of these people as well are based on like amalgamations of people I used to work with. So, but Abby, the assistant, is she's mean, she's overly ambitious, she'll stab you in the back, and she just there's kind of not very many things good about her. Like I said, I don't like people being mean. I'm not very good at criticism or things like that. So yeah, I don't think I'd like to hang out with Abby.
She was a very unsympathetic character. I would agree. I would not want to have a drink with her or even stand in line next to her. Which of the characters was the toughest for you to develop and get into the head of?
Uh, weirdly, the character I struggled with the most was Frankie, who is an editor in the book. And I feel like I really learned something from writing her, which is that I wrote maybe the first half of the book and I read it through and I thought, I'm kind of happy with where all these characters are going, but Frankie is boring me. Or every time I got to her part, I would just think like, oh, she's bored, she's flat on the page. I couldn't work out why it was. And then I realized that she was just me.
Mm,
She was around my age. Um, she was basically me a year before I wrote it. She was an editor who was feeling underappreciated and underpaid and overworked. Um, and she moaned about her job a lot and she tried hard. And she was in her late 20s, early 30s and didn't know where to go next. And I read it, I was like, oh my God, that's just me. That's why it's boring because real people most of the time don't make fantastic characters because we're not enough. So as soon as I kind of realized that, I went back and rethought her and made sure I was writing a person and not just venting about my own frustrations.
oh yeah,
And then it came together a bit more. But yeah, oddly, the person most similar to me is who I had the most trouble with.
I think sometimes if you forget to add the humor, you take it too seriously, and there is a lot of humor in this book, even though it's about somebody getting killed and death and stuff. There is a ton of humor in it, and it is just such a wry and satirical look at the publishing industry and the whole behind the scenes look at what it's like to be an author at these literary experiences and stuff. If you're writing a character who's so serious and like taking on all of, like you said, the frustrations, the venting, whatever, they can. All of a sudden, it's like this needle scratch when all the other characters are, while they have real jobs and are very serious about their ambitions and things like that. They're also very funny.
Thank you. It's
I,
quite
I
nerve-wracking writing things, which I mean, I think I'm funny, and I'm writing things, and I'm like, oh, that's hilarious, and you don't know. It's very difficult to know if a joke is gonna land with other people. So it's always nice for someone to say they think it's funny too.
no, I was literally, and I know people say laughing out loud a lot, but I was. There were a couple points where I know I was irritating the people in the room with me because they're looking over at me going, why are you laughing so loud? I'm like, it's this book. It's just really, she gets it. The point of view in this book is really, I would think, very challenging to write because you sort of dive into different characters' heads and land there full time for whole scenes. What made you decide that point of view?
It wasn't a decision, it was an accident.
Okay.
So I spoke to an author slash screenwriter a long time ago, and he gave me a good tip, which is to get into the head of characters, write, even if they're not your main character, write a sort of first person, just a chapter, just who they are, just get in their head and just write it all down. So I started doing that with some of the less, we've got Jane, who's our main character, but I started doing that with some of the other characters, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought maybe this could work. Maybe I could make this work within the book. So it's not first person, but yeah, we do start diving into their heads to get to, see who they are and where they are in the whole plot. It started off more as an exercise and ended up being what I stuck with.
I found that really effective in this story, partly because when you're reading a murder mystery, a lot of times there's maybe two points of view, tops three. Here we have everybody's point of view, and you know one of them is involved in the murder. So then it's that question of, well, what's been left out? And you're like, as a reader, are we dealing with an unreliable narrator here? What is happening? So I thought it was very clever. Also, coming at it from a writing standpoint, I thought, wow, incredibly difficult to pull off, but it made the book very enjoyable to read.
Thank you. It
I,
was it both made it easier and harder because, like you say, it's difficult when people are suspects, so you have to keep mystery even though you're in their head. So that was kind of tricky, but it was also I found really fun to show how different people see things from different angles. And if you meet someone and you think, oh God, I bet they thought I was such an idiot. And the other person's thinking like, wow, they were so clever. I bet they thought I was such an idiot. And it's things like that. It was fun to play with how two people see the same interaction. So I enjoyed that. But keeping the mystery in it was challenging at times.
Bet, yeah, I could see how, but you did it. Like I said, I had no idea until the end how it was going to shake out, and it did. You have readers. I'm gonna not spoil the ending, but there is a great scene. Everything culminates at the end of the festival with a very traditional sort of like, hey, we're having the big awards banquet kind of moment, and we are all in the room. Everybody comes together, so you know it's throwdown time, and throughout it all, you have access to all these heads, and it's just really cool. Yeah, I liked it. Is there a scene in the book that did not make the cut? Or as I should say, a scene that you wrote that did not make the cut into the book?
I know there was one when I was struggling, I didn't know what was going to happen, so I just had them go for lunch. Um, and then I got a bit carried away with writing this lunch scene and doing things in the restaurant, which I thought were funny. Um, and then I think my editor was like, "What? Like, what's the point? What's the point of this?" Yeah, that had to go. But I think that's the only one I can really remember that I cut out.
Right? Yeah, sometimes you just have to do those extra scenes for moving your own self forward through the writer's block and keep the story progressing, right?
Sometimes you just got to type.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Did you have any particular audience in mind while you were writing this?
I guess I knew the genre is a sort of funny, cozy crime audience, but I mostly, maybe it sounds really cliche, but I mostly just had a good time writing it and I thought I would like to read it. I thought it was fun. So that's kind of all I thought about it. I mean, I definitely knew it was within a genre because I think that's helpful. Otherwise, you can just go right off track and write something completely wild and weird. But
Mhm.
other than within that genre, I just had a good time writing it.
Well, and I imagine as a former editor yourself, you have a very high standard for what is entertaining to you, right?
I hope so. Yeah.
I mean, isn't that just the nature of the job where you are a sifter and you're like keeping anything that's not at a good level from getting through to the next, right?
Yeah. I definitely learned a lot from being an editor. I my last sort of proper job was editorial director for crime and thriller. So I read a lot of crime fiction of all sorts, psychological thrillers, horror, detective stories, everything. I definitely learned a lot, and I learned what it needs to have to make the cut. And some of that, most of that is kind of subconscious. You just learn things you don't even know you know it. I knew deep down that that novels need to be pitchable, that you need to be able to talk about them easily, that there needs to be, I guess, a snappy, fun plot you can talk about up front. So I had all of that in mind before sort of going in. And once I knew that was all in place, then you can kind of just enjoy it.
Yeah. And now I want to ask, you sort of alluded to this. Is there more to come for Jane and her newfound band of friends?
Yes, there is. So
I love it.
I'm editing book two at the moment. Book two is called A Killer Plot. And
Ooh, okay.
Jane, Jane goes to London for her friend Natasha's big splashy book launch. And spoiler, things go wrong, doesn't all go to plan, and maybe there's another body involved.
Yeah,
So
possibly.
yeah, yeah. So book two, Jane's in London, which was very, very hard to write. I've found setting something in a big city was definitely brought its own challenges. And then I've also started writing the third book where Jane goes to a writing retreat in a village in France. So
Oh,
plenty more to come.
yeah. And all three in that cozy sort of genre, which would make London a tough lift. How do you keep that
Yeah.
in, right?
Yeah, I it definitely made it tough. I mean, often cozy crime is set in a small village or rural environment. And it turns out that's easier because it's easier to create this small, gossipy atmosphere where everyone knows each other and everyone's connected. One of the biggest cities in the world, much harder to do that in, but I have now managed it. And it's for the UK, London is obviously the heart of the book industry, so it felt important to go there.
Right.
And it, although it's set in a big city, because it's very much contained within that book world, that does still make it a small environment in that way.
I understand. Yeah. It's a microcosm.
Yes, that's the word, microcosm.
Fancy word there.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of scenes, of course, at a literary event, a lot of scenes where people are participating in a little celebratory drinking, a little social drinking, a little self-medicating drinking. What would be your recommendation, mocktail or cocktail or whatever that would pair best for readers enjoying your story?
Oh, the book is very British, and Jane's favorite drink is a lovely glass of white wine. So I would say some English sparkling wine.
Hey, all right. Duly noted. Is there a label that you would most recommend? Not that they're going to get any money from this interview.
I like a vineyard called Chapel Down. They're in Kent, and they make some really, really delicious sparkling white wine. In the book, there's a lot of drinking in British book festivals in general. Like they're hard to stay sober at. And in the book, there's a bar where all the drinks are they have ridiculous names based
Badly,
on.
badly named literary names, yes, which was funny because I that must have been hard to come up with bad literary names, right? Because your impulse is to do it well, and then you're like, no, that's too good. It has to be bad.
I came up with so many. I had a great time. It was great. And then my mother-in-law, the white wine is called Wuthering Whites after Wuthering Heights. My mother-in-law gave me a bottle of wine where she designed a label which said like Wuthering Whites. She designed this whole label which she'd printed and stuck to the bottle and gave it to me the other day. And I was like, oh, I love this. We need to make this.
What a
Um,
great
so
gift.
yeah, that's what you need. You need Wuthering Whites to drink while reading the
So
book.
that's the pairing, Withering Whites. This is not a tea read. This is a white wine read. I like it. All right, tell us, Eve, in if you were to make a spin-off series, what character would you feature?
Oh,
I mean,
like I
besides
said,
James, it's pretty great.
like I said, I love Kimberly,
Kimberly,
and
yeah.
she's also on a different continent.
Ah,
I think it would be fun to one day do in America, something set in New York where we're following Kimberly.
right? I can picture her world very vividly. Yeah,
I've never thought of doing that, but now I'm interested. I could do it as just a short story or something. See what
right?
happens.
So a little novella or something. Yeah.
Great. I'm going to leave this interview with homework for myself.
That's great. What is a book that you keep recommending other people read right now, besides
Oh,
yours?
but yeah, mostly mine. Um, What I mean, at the moment I'm reading The Safe Place, which just won the Booker Prize, so there's not much point in recommending that because it's been recommended.
Yes.
My favorite novel is The Secret History. I've read that absolutely countless times and still
Hmm.
always love it. Um, what else have I loved recently? I enjoyed James, Percival
Hmm.
Everett,
Hmm.
all sorts. I read quite widely. I'm not a snob. I read absolutely everything.
Okay, that's great. That probably helps you dive into your characters differently than if you just stuck to one genre, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I one of my favorite authors has always been Marion Keyes, who
Mm,
is huge
yes.
women slash general fiction author, really funny, really warm. And reading in that area really helps with this sort of writing because although it is a crime novel, it's also mostly character development and humor and warmth and heart. I think reading really widely helps you create the book you want to.
Yes. So the book is A Novel Murder by E.C. Nevin. Eve, it was so lovely to talk to you. Thank you for spending time with us today. Great book. I highly recommend it. It is warm. It is funny. There is murder featuring on every page, and yes, just a delight. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me.